Welcome back to Old Hollywood Briar. This is what most of California looks like. Big expansive farmland. It's a part that most people don't see, but it's where a lot of us are from. I stopped to have a bowl of plum pudding and relax in the oncoming twilight. Join me as we smoke and travel back 900 years in time to the Arizona desert. This is a cigar shop and a gas station, and I just felt like I had to show you this. So if you're going to Arizona and you're going out there into the desert, you'll see this waterfall of humidity here. Dry as a bone out there, my friend. You can stop at this gas station, and it is literally the only thing at the exit. You get off this exit, there's a road, and then there's this gas station that has this giant humidor filled with cigars. And basically this is where all the Californians would come and cross the state line to get their cheaper cigars, because as you know, if you live in California, you are paying the tax of the People's Republic of California, my friend, and it is a pricey. And I gotta say that some of the roads in India are better than the roads in LA, which is shocking. And the subways in India are much cleaner than the ones in New York, which is also quite shocking. So Arturo Fuente, you saw those there. They were like $3 to $6. Here's some acid cigars. Those are great. I really started to get into flavored cigars in the mid-2000s. They've got some great offerings, and they do a really good job with tobacco, really good wrappers, really good presentation. This is a lot of bundled cheap stuff, and then some new brands that I'm not really familiar with. I'm gonna have to get on some of those because I'm sure they're pretty good. A lot of the newer tobacco stuff coming out, I mean, it's just really good stuff. Cornell and Deal's doing some really good blends. Seattle Pipe Club, Plum Pudding, you kidding me? It's amazing. So, a lot of this stuff that came out, in the 2000s is just really good, so I got to get in there. Monte Cristo right here. The son of Monte Cristo, Benji Menendez, one time gave me a cigar box. Here it is. I have not opened it. He gave me this in 2004. It's a Spanish Rosados. It was when that brand first launched, and I have just sat on that for about 15 years now, I guess, Romeo y Julieta. I was never really a fan of these. I've smoked a lot of them. I've never liked a single one. I don't know why. I'm not a fan of the Connecticut broadleaf wrapper. I'm really not a fan of the light wrappers in general. I'm really more of a Cuban cigar smoker. When the internet came around, those were really easy to get a hold of. And I also happen to live, really close to Mexico, which has an S.A. Habano store. Partagas is what I'm looking for here. We got a lot of offerings, but Partagas, here it is. This is my jam. I've just always been a Partagas man. The Cameroon wrapper I loved. I loved Benji's story. Benji owned the factory at H. Upman. He was, one of the last guys out, in Cuba, where his father had made the Monte Cristo No. 2, all of these really famous cigars, and Benji had to watch his factory just be destroyed because of the revolution in Cuba. And politics aside, there was a lot of obviously corruption going down before the revolution took place, but it's funny because Benji said that he'll still get together with the guys, the old masters from Cuba and the rollers, or the guys from the factories, and they'll talk tobacco. And he's like, if as long as we talk tobacco, everything's fine. But the moment that it turns to they want to start talking about communism, he's like, I just got to get up and walk out of the room because I'll start yelling at those guys. And you could see, he lost everything, and he had to build up from scratch, but he did it again. He just recently retired a couple of years ago as a VP of one of the major cigar companies, General Cigar, I believe. So here's it's called the Gigante, I think it was called. This one, I left the cigar. You see some sunspots on the cigar. When I went to purchase it, I noticed some sunspots, and I went back to go get another one, and they all seem to have them. So I guess this is a lower grade wrapper, and I don't know if that's why this wrapper, came apart while I was smoking it, but I did kind of leave it in my car overnight one night. So, maybe I could have been a little bit more careful with it. But I gotta say, the flavor of this one was spectacular. The smoke was just really rich, almost tasted kind of like a vapor. It had a really good amount of spice to it, and I'm not super familiar with exactly which leaf is in the cigar, so I'd have to look it up, but it was really, really tasty. And I liked the wrapper too. I thought the wrapper was kind of, a good color. It just was a lower grade leaf, which, I mean, for a couple bucks, I don't mind. So that wasn't the end of the world. Now this one here, having currently a bath from that humidor, this one was a tube. This wrapper split as well, so I was a little bummed about that. That's a nice dark wrapper there. It's beauty, and I was really excited about this one because that's, those darker wrappered Partagas cigars. They always just tend to be more rich, and that's what I'm looking for. I mean, I'm looking for the more Cuban experience. I don't like the Connecticut broadleaf, light, creamy Romeo y Julieta. That's kind of what they're famous for. I'm looking for bold, spicy. And this cigar just didn't contain any of those flavors that I was looking for, which was really a shame because I liked the construction and the appearance a lot. But, I grew up in Southern California, swinging a hammer, working since I was 13 years old. So, I grew up eating off the lunch trucks, working with a lot of Mexicans, obviously, because I worked in construction and lived so close to Mexico. But, they would bring in these, like, spicy hot sauces that would just melt the back of your eyes out. And they always wanted to dare the white kid to try them. So, of course, taking the dare, I always did. And it developed my taste for this spice. And that's just been insatiable for me, so I'm always looking for that spice. My mixture Baby's Bottom 1938, I love it because it's smooth, but it's got that back-end English kick, and anything with Latakia is going to scratch that itch. For now, let's go back to the desert at the edge of the Apache Trail, the route that Teddy Roosevelt used to explore the Old West. He compared the scenes along the trail to the grandeur of the Alps or the Rockies. I visited the Tonto National Forest in the spring. The rains had been good and the sweet scent of desert blossom hung in the air in the evenings. I found myself constantly stopping to try to photograph the elusive flowers that usually only bloom for a day, and then usually only at night. It was Roosevelt's actions which created the national park and the dam that tamed the great desert valley which was prone to flooding and erratic flow. An oasis on the western side of the Superstition Mountains, the dam led to the control of water which allowed for the creation of the city of Phoenix. It's easy to see why the old Rough Rider had such a passion for the place, the land of great solitude and beauty. The earth was harsh, but if the flow of water could be mastered, it was fertile and would yield good crops. A park ranger recalled a man from Iowa peering out over the desert valley say, "Well, you can't grow corn here." But the people living there did grow corn, squash, beans, and cotton in the valley, that they themselves had irrigated using a system of canals buried under Lake Roosevelt. Upon seeing the cliff dwellings there, Roosevelt named the area a national monument, along with the Grand Canyon and his other reserves. The cliff dwellings were home to the people of the Salt River Valley, called the Salado people. Salado in Spanish means salty. I can tell you right now why they were so salty. These little cactus jobbers right here. I spoke with a guide and he mentioned that these things have little microscopic hairs that jet out past the spines. They'll catch onto your shirt or body hair, and the motion injects one of the tiny pods deep into the skin. He said the best way to remove it is with a large tooth beard comb. Once again, beards save the world. And in the 1400s, the Salado people just mysteriously disappeared. Archaeologists aren't really sure what happened to them, if it was war or famine or drought, but this was their footwear. I mean, this is not a mystery. They're walking around with those landmines everywhere and they're wearing these for shoes. No, I'd be out of there in like 2 seconds flat. And guides at the monument said that these shoes lasted one trip up the mountain, so they were very valuable. Let's put this in perspective in our minds when this was built. This tree was felled in 1930. 1607, you got Jamestown. You got Columbus sails to America, 1492. 1325, the Aztecs began the construction of Tenochtitlan. And then back all the way in 1100, you have the Salado people and the people in Mesa Verde. They start constructing these little fort cities. So you can see on the left there, a little V-shaped kind of dark in the rock. That was the entrance, and there was a ladder that went down. So if they ever wanted to deny access to the cities, now remember these walls would not have all been eroded. They would have all been built up. So in order to deny access into this little, dwelling, they built 20 rooms in there. But they could just pull up that ladder and then nobody could get up. So if you walk up in there, you can walk around and look at some of these have been repaired. They've done some structural reinforcements, obviously, because this thing would have just fallen over on top of you. But you can go in there and you can see they've put this, by the way, sand down so that there's a clay floor underneath this. So the Salado people, when they went up and built this thing, they actually like laid the floor out and put clay down so that they could sweep it out, and it was very clean and nice. They've said that they only found 2 bodies in the dwellings, and that mostly that the people would have probably been taken out and buried if they died. You're supposed to be able to see, and some of these are still handprints in the plaster, but I didn't see any, although I did not really look that hard. Each of the rooms had a little hearth. If you look here too, you see that's lodge pine. That is the original roof put on there in 1100 AD. And, you know, if you saw the valley earlier, there was no pine. They had to go over to, like, the mountains to get that, you know, I mean, what was that, like 8 logs, maybe 4 logs that they split there? Yeah, I mean, you can see some of the relics here. There's a museum down at the bottom before you go up. There's that shoe. I mean, they said that if you find one of these shoes, that they're incredibly valuable. Because, like I said, that they would only last like one trek up the mountain, and then they would have just been destroyed. Obviously, but you know, I hear Joe Rogan's always talking about how back then, if you didn't wear shoes, that you just built like major calluses on your feet. But I mean, calluses that are going to stop those little prickly landmines. Look at that; they could have made some corncob pipes. You know, these guys were inventive enough to build cliff dwellings, not inventive enough to come up with the corncob pipe. I mean, come on, guys. You're wearing, yucca basket woven sandals for shoes, and you got no corn cobs. They were weaving little, they did their little spinning here. So they were like weaving, working stuff. Here's a little model of the thing you just saw in real life. You can kind of see how it was set up when they found it. But yeah, so all those lodge poles, yeah, just going to have to go out and grab those in the next mountain range, which was like, what, I don't know, like 30 miles away, because we're down in the valley. And you could just see this going down, right? I mean, like, hey, Jethro, grab an extra pair of yucca shoes because we're going 30 miles to the tree line. I mean, that would have just been crazy. Well, let's just take a smoke break for a second. This video is getting kind of long. Needs a little intermission. A friend of mine, EDC Scoundrel, gifted this Stonehaven to me, about 2 ounces of Stonehaven, and I bought this Savinelli Corto pipe from him. And it's a really nice short smoker. I mean, it has its moments, but I actually really like it. This Stonehaven is just really amazing, and I'm glad to have met Scoundrel. He's a really good guy and a good person, and that's kind of hard to come by in Los Angeles, to be honest with you. Well, you've been listening to me talk about the desert forever, which is probably putting most of you to sleep. For those who are still awake, here's some stuff that I've been collecting, a little Easter egg for you. A bronze ashtray, supposedly from the era of Louis XIV, and some pipes. And your friendly daily reminder to stay woke, folks.
Stay woke?
Yeah.
You always say that.
I'm constantly saying stay woke. I have that on an index card that I tape to my forehead as I walk around while I make the show. It's important to stay woke.
I think...
First, get woke.
Get woke.
Get woke first, then don't get unwoke. Stay woke.
Yeah.
Don't be slept. Get woke.
Don't stay slept.
Everyone's slept.
All right, you ready to get back in? Here's Teddy Roosevelt, pictured with his famous Rough Riders in Cuba, 10 years before he would set foot on the old Apache Trail. In Cuba, Roosevelt fought the Spanish for supremacy of the gateway to the Americas. His history with the first Americans is a checkered one. Many point to the time he said, "I don't go so far as to think that the only good Indians are the dead Indians, but I believe that 9 out of every 10 are." He spoke that day as a warrior, and a lot of people hated him for saying it. The Roosevelt equestrian statue in New York has been marred with red paint more than once. However, that one quote doesn't really describe the way he felt or dealt with the people of the First Nations. There was another famous traveler of the old Apache Trail who made similar comments in his own autobiography. "I have killed many Mexicans. I do not know how many, for frequently I did not count them. Some of them were not worth counting." This man, also speaking as a warrior, has never been censored for his comments, nor has his sculpture been attacked with red paint. Rather, he is lauded as a cultural icon and hero. His path along the Apache Trail was a bloody one. His name, Geronimo. Legend has it that Geronimo, whose real name was Goyakla, was such a fearsome killer that he received the name Geronimo from the desperate screams of the Mexican soldiers pleading in Spanish to Saint Jerome for help as Geronimo killed them with his knife. Saint Jerome in Spanish is pronounced Geronimo. Known as one of the greatest warriors in history, Geronimo was able to avoid capture for over 30 years, surviving and raiding as a bandit. In the end, it took nearly a quarter of the entire U.S. Army to capture him. It is likely that Geronimo would have spent a few nights in the cliff dwellings, and was very often known to travel along the same path as the future president. 5 First Nation chiefs rode with Geronimo on Theodore Roosevelt's inaugural parade. Geronimo, who was still being held as a prisoner of war, had become a successful farmer, but the old warrior longed to be back home with his people. After the inauguration, in the Oval Office with the president, Geronimo held up his wrists and asked Roosevelt, "Take the ropes from off our hands." Geronimo begged as tears ran down his face. But Roosevelt refused. "You killed many of my people. You burned villages and were not good Indians." According to the Smithsonian, Roosevelt was told that the Apache warrior would be safer on the reservation in Oklahoma than in Arizona. If he went back, there'd be a very likely chance to find a rope awaiting him, for a great many people in the territory were spoiling for a chance to kill him. A few years later, Geronimo fell from his horse while riding at night and was not discovered until the next morning. He eventually succumbed to pneumonia resulting from his injuries, and although he died a prisoner of war, he dedicated his life story to the president. In his autobiography, he wrote, "Because he has given me the permission to tell my story, because he has read that story and knows I try to speak the truth, because I believe that he is fair-minded and will cause my people to receive justice in the future, and because he is chief of a great people, I dedicate this story of my life to Theodore Roosevelt, President of the United States." The tale of the two warriors, Geronimo and Roosevelt, mixed together like blood spilled on the floor of the dry valley. From the Salado's attempt to escape, Geronimo's raid of revenge on the Mexican soldiers who murdered his family, and Roosevelt's conquest of the land and tribes. The story is one that has been repeated throughout human history. In fact, a similar story was unfolding at nearly the exact same time on the opposite side of the planet, in Africa, between Cecil Rhodes and Lobengula Khumalo. What Rhodes lost, Roosevelt won. The culmination of all these stories reminds me of the story of Candide by Voltaire. Mankind have a little corrupted nature, for they were not born wolves, and yet they have become wolves. God has given them neither cannon of 4 and 20-pounders, nor bayonets, and yet they have made cannon and bayonets to destroy one another. One last thought from this journey. As I was traveling in the area, I happened upon a small shrine. After driving so long in the car, I decided to stop and have a bowl of Dunhill Standard. There are several large stones marked up with numbers like bingo cards. Deep holes have been carved into the rocks near the numbers. These are competition boulders where miners would compete against each other to see who could drill the fastest hole for a stick of dynamite. I had stopped at the shrine twice on my journey to relax on the bench and smoke. I was surprised by the amount of people who had came to visit the shrine in the 20 minutes or so that I was there. On my way out of town, I stopped and met a man with a Bible who was talking about Jesus. I apologized for smoking. He said, No, Reuben, pictured right behind that tin there. He wouldn't mind at all, and the Lord doesn't mind if you'd enjoy a bit of the leaf." My first thought was, God bless the Native Americans who believe in Jesus. They tend to have less rules, more love. Geronimo also converted to Christianity late in his life, but was rejected by Roosevelt's church as he couldn't keep away from the card tables. The man went on to tell me that Reuben Licano, his friends called him Gypsy, was the man who had built the shrine in 1977, and he had died just 1 week before I filmed this. We talked for a while about God and Jesus. I told him a little about science and space-time. The man mentioned that in the current political climate, people were telling him to go back to Mexico. "I've been to Mexico before," he said. "I stopped going a long time ago, because whenever they would see me down there, they would beat me up. I was brown, but I was American. I was born here. My grandmother's grandmother was born here. My family has lived here since this land was called Mexico. They don't want me here, and they don't want me over there. Brother, tell me, where am I supposed to go?" It was then that I could see the strand of similarity. There he was, once again, 900 years later. He might as well have been wearing the woven yucca sandals. Another man in need of shelter, like the Salado, like Geronimo, except this time not a man of war, but a man of God. They say that angels walk among us and that we're unaware. I took the man's number and told him I would call him the next time I was in town. But to be honest, I like to think of the man out in the desert, preaching like John the Baptist, a voice crying out in the wilderness, calling mankind to repent from the hatred in their hearts. This shrine was built when I was born, and I am now an old man. I hope that when I die, someone comes and sticks a picture of me up in one of these walls, with a note that I loved this place, and that I hope to one day return.